Hello everyone, welcome back to Movie Recapped Girl. Get ready to uncover a clever, dark mystery, where nothing is innocent in the film Hippopotamus. When the movie starts, there's this hurt girl who's waking up in a completely white room. The second she wakes up, she freaks out and tries to stand, but she just can't. Turns out her legs are all bandaged up because they're injured. So the woman's checking out where she is, when this creepy dude's voice pops up, telling her she slept in. The guy says his name's Thomas Allcroft, and he's the one who kidnapped her. He tells the lady he's gonna hold her hostage until she loves him. Then he rattles off some personal stuff about her, like her name's Ruby Watts, where she grew up, and where she went to college. He even spills about what her parents do for a living, and how he found out she's scared of the dark. Ruby doesn't have a clue about how she got into Thomas's hands, and she can't remember anything from before she was kidnapped. Tears streaming down her face, she asks Thomas what he's done to her, referring to the scrapes on her knees. Thomas lets her know he had to cut her tendons, and tells her to stay still if she ever wants to be able to walk again. He also lets her know that he didn't mess with her personal stuff, which is in a black purse sitting on a chair right by the door. Right next to Ruby on the floor, there's what looks like some food, and a tiny cup with a couple of pills in it. Thomas tells her he gave her 2 pills, one birth control pill and one for the pain. He then starts telling Ruby what their life together is going to be like. He'll make sure she gets food every day and help her with basic stuff like washing up and using the bathroom. She'll be starting her day at 7 in the morning and wrapping up at 11 at night. Getting away won't be easy because the next house is miles away. After Thomas wraps up, Ruby questions him if he hurt her, but he says he didn't. Thomas bails, leaving Ruby all by herself in the room. When the scene wraps up, we see Ruby spots her bracelet with the engraving Ruby X. The next day, Ruby is still hanging out in the same place as she was the day before. The empty dish next to her shows she ate what Thomas made for her, but she didn't take any of the pills. Thomas walks into the room to see how she's doing, and he's bummed when he sees Ruby didn't take her pills. He begs her to take the pills because her pain is just going to get worse, but Ruby just blows him off. When he's about to leave the room, Ruby questions Thomas about his actions, but he doesn't say anything back. Thomas walks out of the room, and as he shuts the door behind him, everything goes dark. All we can hear is Ruby's panicked scream from the other end. Later that day, Thomas drops by to see Ruby again. Now the room's bathed in a deep red light, showing that it's night. Thomas gently moves Ruby into a curled-up position on the floor while she's sleeping. Then he leaves the room. The next day, Thomas gets Ruby her breakfast. Ruby is still knocked out cold, but wakes up when Thomas raps on the wall. As soon as he's gone, Ruby's sleepy, out-of-it look changes to a serious one, showing that she was just pretending to be tired. She then shuffles over to her purse. That's all the way on the other side of the room. She rummages through her bag, fishes out her mirror where she keeps her ID. Ruby looks at it, totally confused. When she spotted a shadow through a small window, she quickly stuffed her stuff back in her bag, but a little plastic bag slipped out and rolled off. Ruby slides back to her regular spot and sees the ball. She quickly grabs it and stuffs it in her pocket just before Thomas walks into the room. Thomas hands her some grub and gives her face a once-over. He sees that she's hurting and tells her she should have let him know. He digs into his pocket and whips out a bottle of pills. He tells Ruby to take a bigger dose, and she does it. He gives her the pills to take and then walks out. Later on, it looks like there's a woman bobbing around in some dark water. Turns out it was just a piece of Ruby's dream. She wakes up all freaked out and tries to stand, but a sudden, severe leg pain makes her stop. Thomas is already chilling in the room, lounging in a chair near Ruby. Ruby questions him about his identity and what he's done to her. Thomas coolly repeats what he told her when she first saw him in the room. He's Thomas Allcroft, and he's going to hold her hostage until she falls for him. He just keeps saying the same stuff he knows about her, over and over. Ruby wants to know what he did to her legs. Thomas says they had to do it, so she wouldn't run off, but assures her that her legs will heal with time. He tells her that she just needs to follow the rules and take her meds. He promises her that he's not up to anything dodgy when he gives her birth control pills. Ruby remembers her daily routine and realizes she doesn't have much of a shot at getting out. She doesn't say a word until Thomas decides to walk out of the room. She asks him again, "Did you attack Lee?" Thomas gets mad, chucks her bag, and storms out of the room. As soon as she's by herself, Ruby checks out the ball she'd stashed away in her pocket. She also gives her bracelet a good once-over. Next, we get a peek at how the rest of Ruby's day goes. Thomas is helping Ruby with her physical therapy, even giving her baths with washcloths. At night, Ruby keeps bouncing the ball against the bedroom door. The following day, Ruby spots this injury on the back of her head. She rummages through her bag, grabs a mirror, but can't really see her wound clearly. She ends up smashing the mirror into little bits and takes a good look at her injury. Before she could even get a good look around, she spots Thomas being a bit nosy, watching her from the other side of the door. She tucks the piece of glass under her left knee bandage and attempts to return to her regular spot. Right before she can do anything, Thomas walks in and slips her some drugs. When night falls, Thomas plays a recording meant to scare Ruby into staying put and not trying to escape. He starts tidying up the room and moving stuff around, then dozes off in the chair. His phone alarm gets him out of bed. He switches off the depressing sound, who helps Ruby sit up and then heads out. Next, we did a look at Thomas and Ruby hanging out for a bunch of days. Thomas is doing stuff like bringing Ruby food and helping her stay clean, while Ruby mostly spends her nights tossing her ball around. One day, Ruby is spotted messing around with the pipes under the sink. Thomas doesn't seem to mind the mess she made when he walks in to bring her breakfast. As he's digging into what she's done, Ruby pops a question. Can she ask him something? She's like, "What if I never fall for you? Am I going to be stuck here forever?" She then cracks a joke about what Thomas did to her legs. Thomas throws Ruby off when he asks her what he can give her. Thomas remarks that she's clearly feeling better, since she's even cracking jokes about her situation. Thomas mentions she might be getting a little tired of all this, and suggests bringing her something to make her time here a bit more bearable. Ruby ponders a bit, then tells Thomas to get her a pillow, a blanket, and a book to kill some time. Thomas does as he's told, then points at the two pencil sketches on the wall, one of a chair and the other of a brain, and asks her about them. She says they look good. Thomas tells her she's looking good and asks her to remind him again what she needed him to bring her, so she does. The next day, we see Ruby just chilling on a mattress with a pillow next to her. Thomas comes in and hands her a book. After she skims it, she says she's read it already. Ruby's really freaking out because that book is the only thing she can remember from before she was held captive. Thomas tells Ruby that she might remember some stuff if the right thing set it off, and that gives her a bit of hope. Thomas says he'll help her get her memory back, and she's grateful for it. Later on, when Thomas gives her some grub, he checks with Ruby to see if she needs anything else. She asks for some red bush tea, and he gets it for her straight away. After she takes a whiff, Ruby stirs up a forgotten memory. She grins and asks Thomas if he had any idea she'd choose this particular tea. He grins and reminds her that it's the only thing she ever sips on. Ruby questions him on how he knows so much about her, and he simply says he did his homework. Later in the day, Ruby's caught checking out her book. She flips to a page full of random letters, but when she puts that mirror piece she found earlier on it, she sees a message in the reflection saying, "Don't trust him." Thomas walks into the room a few seconds later, carrying a table. Turns out, Thomas was keen on having dinner with them, and so they did. Thomas hits up Ruby about the book, and she totally loves it, especially the ending. Thomas tries to hold Ruby's hand with a smile, but she yanks hers back. Thomas checks in with Ruby, asking her what's up. Ruby was a bit unsure at first, but she finally asks Thomas how many others were trapped before her. Thomas says he didn't do it, but Ruby's determined to find out what really happened. She goes on to accuse Thomas of creepily following, controlling, attacking, and killing young women just like her. Before she can say any more, Thomas slams his hand on the table, giving her a scare. He cleans the blood off his arm and once more says she's got it all wrong. Ruby says she doesn't want Thomas to have done what he's doing with her to anyone else, because she thinks what they share is unique. Thomas insists that nobody else is involved and then walks out of the room. As soon as Thomas is out the door, Ruby's frightened look vanishes, showing us she was only faking it. The following day, Thomas tells Ruby that her legs are getting better, but they're going to need a bit more time to fully heal. After he takes off, Ruby peels off her leg bandages and checks out her wound. Looks like her legs didn't get any cuts. She somehow pulls herself together and heads to the door. When she grabs the doorknob, another memory pops up. It's of a guy, and Ruby right at her front door. Ruby stops trying to unlock the door and heads back to her bed. While she's checking out this weird note in her book, she accidentally rubs off some of the ink it was written in. Once she catches a whiff of the ink on her hand, she remembers something new. It's about her stashing something behind a brick in the room. Ruby pulls out the brick and a bunch of matches drop, showing that the cryptic notes were written with these matches. Later on, Thomas and Ruby grab a bite together. Ruby grabs a candle to make things a bit more romantic. After Thomas hands Ruby the lit match, he suggests they give their relationship another shot, and she's totally on board. Ruby spills to Thomas about this dream. She keeps having where she's going underwater. As she's chatting about her dream, her hand is slowly moving towards the match. She shares with Thomas how, in her dream, a hand pops up to rescue her. When she finishes her story, she's about to light the match, but Thomas is there, holding her hand. Ruby pretends to cough, clutching her chest, and smoothly swipes the match without Thomas catching on. Next up, we did a peek into what a typical day looks like for Ruby. She's doodling in her notebook, moving her legs around, and figuring out how to use her shattered mirror piece as a tool for defense. So, while Thomas is helping her learn to walk again, she's acting like her legs aren't doing too well. When the scene wraps up, we see that Ruby jotted down, "Play along," in her book. The next morning, you can see Ruby doing push-ups. As soon as she hears Thomas coming towards her room, she bolts to her bed. She acts like she's reading her book so no one gets suspicious. Thomas offers to help her with a leg workout before they eat, and she's down for it. So Thomas is helping Ruby get around, and she's still pretending like her legs are hurt. Once they make it across the room, Thomas gives her a pat on the back for doing so well. He mentions that if they keep this up, they might even get to eat dinner upstairs. Thomas and Ruby are chowing down for dinner once more when night falls. Thomas tells Ruby that this meal is something really special and encourages her to give it a try. Once she takes a bite, Ruby remembers something else. This time about her and Thomas eating out at a restaurant. Looks like they're on a date and really hitting it off. Then Thomas tells Ruby to shut her eyes and slips on a necklace he got for her. He plants a kiss on her forehead. Then we switch back to what's happening now. Ruby can't believe it and asks Thomas if they used to be a couple. Thomas agrees with Ruby and reminds her that the meal she can't forget was actually their anniversary dinner. Ruby gives him a smile through her tears. Ruby's brushing her teeth when it gets dark. While checking out the two sketches Thomas hung up, she spots R.A. squiggled on one of the edges of the sketch. When Ruby woke up, she saw some guy in a boat through the tiny window in her room. Afterwards, she and Thomas start chatting about her book. Thomas said that Ruby was always glued to her book. He starts thinking back on the good times they had together. While he's sharing his tale, it switches to Ruby sketching, with lots of crayon drawings around her. Thomas is out cold on her bed. Once she was certain he was knocked out, Ruby sneaks off towards the door. Thomas tells her it's chilly out before she heads out, so she needs to grab a coat. Rather than unlocking the door, she bends over to grab her ball, while Thomas is just starting to wake up. The scene wraps up with Ruby admitting she just can't get to sleep. The next bit starts with Ruby snoozing away and Thomas tucking her in, which jobs up another flashback. This time it looks like her and Thomas getting cozy. So, the next day, Thomas is dancing with Ruby and bam, another memory pops up. Remember when Ruby and Thomas were dancing at a party and Thomas was telling her he loved her? Ruby says she feels the same about him, and they end up kissing. After going through the flashback, Ruby tells Thomas that she's totally convinced they were at item. Later, Thomas breaks down how the remote that runs all the gadgets in the room works. He plays some tunes, and Ruby begins to groove just for him. They share a laugh and a kiss, but right when things start to heat up, Ruby breaks down and starts crying. Ruby questions how they ended up in this mess, and Thomas says he'll break it down for her. While Thomas is telling the story, we're taken back to a flashback. Ruby's at the bar, just hanging out and waiting for Thomas. She's hanging out with her roommate Nick, who's clearly trying to hit on her. Thomas couldn't meet her because he missed his train, so Ruby and Nick just headed home. Thomas drops a note for Ruby, saying his pal Rob's coming to get him, and he's looking forward to seeing her again soon. So Nick tries to make a move on Ruby, and she's like, no thanks, but he keeps trying anyway. He hits her until she passes out, then attacks her really badly. When Thomas got to Ruby's house and saw the mess, he offed Nick, who was still wasted, and hauled Ruby over to Rob's car. Rob wasn't too thrilled, but he drove them both to Thomas's place where Ruby woke up. Turns out, Ruby can't remember anything because of that thing that happened with Nick. Before Rob gets the chance to dial 911, Thomas holds him back. They have a little spat, but Rob decides to help Thomas with his scheme to jog Ruby's memory. They head way up north where Thomas decides to part ways with Rob, but not before thanking him for all his help. Thomas ends up taking Ruby to a deserted island farm and holds her captive there. As time goes by, Thomas begins to understand what retrograde amnesia is. It's when you forget everything that happened before a certain event. He also found out that whenever Ruby got a lot of sleep, her memory would kinda hit the reset button and only remember stuff up to right after the attack. Thomas tries to jog Ruby's memory by showing her some photos, but she doesn't react right away. To help her get her memory back faster, Thomas figured out how to bring up specific memories and manage her sleep so she could keep learning all day and night. When he hands her her favorite book, Ruby responds well and starts to improve. Thomas keeps trying, but thinks he needs a fresh start to really win Ruby's trust and memory back. So he builds this white room and creates a made-up story about how he cut the tendons in Ruby's legs and kidnapped her. After Thomas wraps up his story, Ruby is crying, and it looks like she's starting to remember things again. They get cozy and end up falling asleep together. Ruby wakes up before Thomas and quickly turns off his watch so it doesn't set off his alarm. She grabs a piece of the shattered mirror and jabs it into him. She begins to crawl away, but Thomas attempts to hold her back. She boots him and manages to bolt outside. She's crying and looking up at the sky, then she tries to get to the boat but faints before she can get away. She wakes up in a hospital and the doc tells her she'll be okay, but she might have a bit of trouble remembering stuff cause of her injury. Turns out the doc is actually Thomas, who's up to his old tricks again, trying to get Ruby to trust him and remember everything. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more incredible stories like this one, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be back with another video soon.